let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders here for a little bit. Look, the Raiders have obviously been making a ton of big time moves this offseason. Of course, revamping their coaching staff, revamping the front office. Generally, a lot of the moves the Raiders have been making have been very well received. But there was one move that originally was announced, had a little bit of consternation among Raider Nation. And that, of course, was the hiring of Luke Getsy, to be the new offensive coordinator for the Raiders. But some news has come out over the Super Bowl week that maybe shines a light on the fact this move may be a lot smarter than people think. Let's go into the report and we'll talk about it more on the other side. This is according to NBC Sports. Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams was thrilled to learn that Luke Getsy has been hired as a new offensive coordinator in Las Vegas. Adams played 8 seasons in Green Bay, and Getsy was on the Packers coaching staff for 7 of those seasons, including 2 as wide receivers coach and 2 more as passing game coordinator. So Adams knows what it's like to play for Getsy, and he's excited to do so again in 2024. That was a good feeling knowing a guy that I've worked with. Adams told Paul Gutierrez of ESPN, I know how he works, I know how his mind works, and we've had success together. So it's definitely exciting. Adams says Getsy shows players the respect of listening to their perspectives and giving them ownership of the offense. There's been some talk that Adams might want out of Las Vegas after a disappointing 2023 season, but Adams sounds like he's expected to remain a Raider and happy to be in a familiar place with a familiar coach. So this is obviously great news, backing up the fact that the hiring of Getsy could be an actually really critical move for the Raiders going forward. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but first, Raider Nation in the comment section below. Now that a few days have gone by and the Cliff Kingsbury fiasco has ended, now that you've heard these comments involving Davante Adams, give us your grade of hiring Luke Getsy as offensive coordinator right now. Do you love it? Give it an A. Do you hate it still? Do you give it an F? Or are you kind of waiting to see, give it kind of a meh, maybe a C, C plus? Whatever your grade is, put it in the comment section below. The Raiders hiring of Luke Getsy, now that you've heard Adams' comments. But Miles, let me throw it over to you. What's your perspective now that you've heard from Davante Adams and where the Raiders could be going here on offense?
Yeah, Nick, I think it's pretty safe to say offensively, Davante Adams is by far the Raiders' best player. I would say on the offensive side of the ball, he's the best guy on the field. Now, the whole team, him, Max Crosby, probably neck and neck there. They're both very, very good players, so no need to split hairs there. So I think keeping Davante Adams in Las Vegas was very crucial. And I think when you read this story, what you hear is that Adams didn't feel heard under Josh McDaniels. I think there's a lot of stuff that was going on in that regime that kind of had him bitter, that kind of had him feel like, okay, no one is going for an offensive game plan that I liked. Nobody is really, doing the things that highlight Davante Adams. The reason they brought him to Las Vegas was to be the star of this offense. Now, I think, you see the hiring of Antonio Pierce. That kind of changes the tide a little bit, but he's a defensive guy. I don't know if that's necessarily going to 100% sway Davante Adams to not want to leave Las Vegas. And now Antonio Pierce, once again, makes another brilliant move. How does he do it? He brings in Davante Adams, former offensive coordinator, former wide receiver coach, a guy that was with him when he started in the league in 2014 all the way up to 2021. They've been together for such a long time. He's helped Davante Adams develop throughout his entire career. I think this was an excellent, excellent job by Antonio Pierce in that front office, just picking the right guy. Because Luke Getsy came in, he helped Davante Adams develop. Those first 2 seasons, he really got the ball rolling. Then he became the wide receivers coach, was able to get him really rolling. 2016, 2017, those were when Davante Adams started to pop off, almost had a 1,000-yard season. Then at the end of that time, in 2020, 2021, that's when he was really going 1,370 yards, 1,550 yards. He was actually at the peak of his career under Luke Getsy. He had the best season ever under Luke Getsy. So I think this is a great move by the Raiders. And I think, like the end of this article said, this is going to be a move that helps make Davante Adams happy and keeps him in Las Vegas happily, not making him want to get traded anywhere else. So great move by Antonio Pierce, that front office, and I'm really excited to see what Davante Adams does next season.
Yeah, there's clearly a theme and a strategy here with the Raiders hirings in terms of everything they're doing with their coaching staff and really with a lot of the players as well. I hate using the term players coach because it has such a negative connotation, but it really does seem like the Raiders are trying to build an environment where players are more involved, more collaborative, at least the stars, the best players. And I think that's a great strategy, right? Why shouldn't Max Crosby be involved with some defensive strategy or have a say in the coaching staff? Because he's such a phenomenal player. Why shouldn't Davante Adams have to work with a guy who will help him out and make him achieve his best? Like, we live in this weird world sometimes where, like, the coach always knows what's best. The players just have to acquiesce. Look, we've seen it. We've seen the Raiders have seen it with Josh McDaniels, for God's sake, that the coach very often doesn't know what's best. So I have no problem with the Raiders finding a coach that has had success with Davante Adams and making sure they pair him up to be successful going forward. And it also makes sense from a salary cap roster management perspective. Let's say Davante Adams forced a trade or forced the Raiders to cut him this offseason because the Raiders just made him so angry for whatever reason. If the Raiders were trying to move off from this offseason, there would be $40 million of dead money applied to Davante Adams against the Raiders salary cap going forward. That's a lot of dead cap. That would really cripple the Raiders' opportunities to make big moves. So it was in the Raiders' best interest from a salary cap perspective to make sure Davante Adams stays on the roster and is happy on the roster. So you look at a Luke Getsy hiring, not only are you maximizing Davante Adams' potential production going forward, who he still is a legitimate superstar. I think McDaniels' offense really limited him, to be totally honest. Davante Adams is still top 5, top 4 receiver in football. I think there's no denying that. But not only are you maximizing Davante Adams, once again, his production, you're also putting yourself in a position to be avoiding a salary cap potential disaster. So again, at first glance, I heard this move and I was like, Luke Getsy, bad reputation in Green Bay. I don't know how I feel about it. But now that we've heard the comments from Adams and we can look at the numbers and the overall perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you talk about the reputation of a guy like Luke Getsy, and especially, time in Green Bay, it seems like Davante Adams is really favorable towards him. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. The time in Chicago, though, he was on two of the worst teams in football at that point in time. Obviously, seeing back-to-back picks that are like really high up there. The Bears just weren't very great, especially 2 years ago. Last year, they're still very middle of the road, not very impressive on a lot of aspects. So he didn't have a whole lot to work with as far as his time in Chicago. I think we've said this time and time and time and time again. Cue the beating the dead horse meme over the video right here. But the Raiders are one of the most talented rosters outside of the quarterback position, I think, in the NFL. They're so talented that I think you bring in somebody, if you bring in a halfway decent quarterback, whether it's through the draft, through free agency, whatever they decide to do there, this team has the potential to be very, very good. You see what like Luke Getsy was able to do with Aaron Rodgers over there in Green Bay. That is a team that, impressed a lot of people offensively. You never wanted to go up against the Packers. So I think this is a good fit here. And I think that now Luke Getsy has the talent to really put his offensive acumen to the test.